Welcome back to Deeper at Life. I'm Dominic. I'm joined by Pastor Andrew and Pastor Matt today. Man, verse by verse study in 1 Corinthians, and we are in chapter 8. We made it out of chapter 7. Felt like the gauntlet in the greatest way. The greatest gauntlet,
Come on, man.
I know, man. Chapter 7 was great. Honestly,
I guess
learned
I'm
a lot.
some slack about it, but you know.
But so let's just start it. Like, how did it feel jumping into chapter 8? And now you got chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, right? Is what you said, or kind of the same thought? Not necessarily the same thought, but a lot of the
there's a thread that goes through it all. So, I mean, I'll tell you what. We can talk about chapter 7, but if I have people responding to a text like on both sides of it, like mad about one thing, mad about the other, or discussing it. Like I've heard more people discussing this text in chapter 7 in a good way, in a challenging way. And that's what the goal is. I said that at the end of the second service. The goal of being a part of the church is that we wrestle with difficult texts. Not wrestle in a sense that we change it, but we wrestle with understanding it and then how to apply it. So chapter 7 was that. Chapter 8 was that for us. And yeah, chapter 8, 9, and 10, and probably the first verse of chapter 11 are all kind of a theme. So chapter 8, he deals with specifically, you know, we're going to talk about it, the meat offered to idols and how to respond to people who disagreed with whether or not to eat it. And his whole point there, I'm kind of get ahead of myself a little bit, but his whole point is you should be willing to deny yourself your freedoms for the good of a brother. And then in chapter 9, he shares an example from his own life on how he's applied that. And then in chapter 10, he comes back to the idols talk and says, now let's talk about this a little more, and then gives more teaching on that. That's going to be later in November. We'll dive into that. But yeah, so that's the verse by verse. We deal with meat offered to idols because we're committed to.
Never so relieved to jump in.
I mean, I thought I was going to be super happy to deal with idols, and then I was really dove into the text, and I'm like, man, this is fun. Like, I'm not sure I should have wished for this text, but I want to be careful there because I love the Bible. I think it's applicable. I think my job is so cool that I have to wrestle, and at times exhausting because you have to wrestle to get clarity of a text before you start presenting it. And you want to present it in a way that makes it understandable and applicable. And that's a tension. Like I can help you understand what it's saying, but sometimes I feel like, how do I take what it is saying and say, here's how you should apply that to your life? And that's what I wrestle with, and hopefully we wrestle with as a church week in and week out, you know? So
I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but what do you, in this specific text in chapter 8, what did you wrestle with most?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the big things that I wrestle with are the issues of meat offered to idols. So, like, what's he talking about? Because we don't live in a culture where actual idols are sacrificed to, and we have to navigate eating meat or things like that. So that was one, and there's just a couple of textual things that I want to get clear. Like verse 3 is a little bit of a, why would he say it that way? You know, there's a he who thinks he has knowledge or imagines that he has knowledge doesn't really know as he ought to know, but he who loves God, he is the one who is known by God. So there's almost this like parenthetical statement that you have to wrestle with, like what's the connection there? So that was part of it. I think we got there. Hopefully it was clear enough. And then probably trying to understand Paul's posture. Was Paul in support of the knowledgeable people, or was he telling them your knowledge is not right? Because he almost feels like in the verse 1, 2, and 3 that he's kind of saying to them, your knowledge isn't good. You're operating off of a faulty knowledge. But then in chapter 4, in verse 4 through 7, 4 through 8, it's like he's affirming their knowledge. So now you're like, wait, is he affirming their knowledge or condemning their knowledge? And I think he's affirming their knowledge, but not the end that they brought their knowledge to, which was arrogancy and being puffed up. So that may be more nerd out on this text conversation, but that's what I wrestled with.
Yeah,
so
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting verses was verse 3, like you said. That one was mind bender. Your big idea was Christians must interact with one another in ways that build up, not tear down. Great big idea. First point we dove into, we build one another up with knowledgeable humility. So you said on Sunday, knowledge is good, but knowledge alone is not maturity.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that, not only just in the Corinthian culture, which you did dive into, but like in our culture.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple things. Let me just reiterate the big idea. The big idea is applicable in this specific instance and in all instances. So I'm not just saying Christians must interact regarding meat offered to idols with one another in ways that build up, not tear down. Christians must interact in all areas in ways that build each other up, not tear them down. Especially applicable in areas where there is a differing view, different opinions, where one person may say, well, I know this and I have an understanding of this and I've studied this out, and you're just not quite as mature in this topic as I am. All of a sudden now there's an arrogance, there's a division that happens. So applicable in this area or topics like this, knowledge is not the problem. Paul was adamant about giving his people that he led knowledge. He prayed for them in Ephesians that they would have more knowledge and understanding of the power that is available to them through the Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, that they would know those things. In Colossians, he talks about that they would be filled with the knowledge of his will. Now in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, he's like, listen, I'm so glad that you had a fullness of knowledge. Like, that's big for Paul. But the problem was that their knowledge, because they were a culture that was so trying to be the ones in the know, the whole I know something you don't know mindset, right? Like, I know something that you just wish you could know, so I'm smarter than you, I'm superior than you, God's blessed me more than you kind of attitude created division. So that's not building up. But knowledge, true knowledge, gospel-centered, God-ordained knowledge leads us to humility, expressed through a love for God and a love for others. So should we seek to know? Yes. But that knowledge cannot produce in us an arrogancy. It must produce in us a selfless, loving service for others.
Yeah. Some you said I wrote down, inflated egos create discord.
Mm.
Man, that's true. And I think, I'm sure I'm still guilty of it at times, but when you come into, you feel like you understand something from scripture that you hadn't seen before,
yeah.
I want to convince you of it to the point where I want to be right.
Yeah.
And I want to win the fight.
Yeah.
And you can kind of feel when your motivation tips, when you're genuinely excited about something that's true, to now I'm going to win an argument.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of these pointless arguments. And I think that's Paul's warning all around, like these arguments that happen. I think he calls them like pointless genealogies and trying to argue about, who came from or whatever. And again, some of those I think those conversations, eschatology is one of those. Like, I think people can get into a topic of discussion about eschatology and it turned very divisive quickly. And it might be that one person knows more about the topic than the other. That still does not make it justifiable to divide or sow discord in the conversation regarding things like that. Or we talked about some of these issues that we probably would be helpful for us to talk about in this podcast. But, I feel like I understand more clearly about this topic of whether or not I can dress this way or watch that movie or drink this drink. And you still don't understand. Like, I know I'm in a place of enlightenment. Right. And now all of a sudden there's an insulting happening and a division happening because you think you are more knowledgeable in this topic.
Yeah. But that was, I feel like, the clearest warning. We had a good discussion of this at our small group last night, is don't push somebody to violate their conscience.
Yeah.
Because you think you're more mature, you have the right answer, you've thought through it maybe a little further down the road, or maybe you haven't, and you're pushing for whatever that side of the agenda is. And it's interesting that Paul has this like treating with kid gloves kind of tone in the way he's talking about these things.
Yes.
Whereas in other letters, there are gospel deal breakers that he hits with a sledgehammer. Like, just read the introduction to Galatians.
Yeah.
It's much less like, well, some people this. No, he comes after them
Yeah.
hard,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. So I think about, I was almost showed this video. I think it's this guy, Jim Marshall. I was trying to look it up. That's why I paused for a second. I was like, I'm gonna make sure his name, but Jim Marshall. There's another one too of an NFL player who I think he picked up a fumble and he started running towards the end zone and running towards the end zone. And he got there and he celebrated and he was like, you dropped the ball. And then some dude walked up to him and told him, you could see his friend or his teammate run up to him like, you went to the wrong end zone. Like, and he scored a touchdown. It ultimately ended up not being a touchdown. It was a safety or whatever in the wrong end zone. And he was celebrating. Here's the point I've used that before is you can think be right. He was right to pick up the ball. And he was right to run to an end zone. And he was right to do all of that, but he did it wrong. Mm-hmm. So you can be absolutely right in almost every area and still have the wrong end and conclusion. So you may be right. You may say, I know that this is not a sin, but if you lead that person into a defiling of or an ignoring of their conscience, the thing that you know is not sin now has become a source of sin because you sinned in causing that brother to go against his conscience. That's the problem, so.
We kind of trick ourselves into thinking like when we're talking to someone, we have to win it, but the freedom in not having to think like that, but actually serve them and love them and be there for them if they're in a place where their conscience is affecting them. Yeah,
the end is the goal, or the end is the justifier. If my end is being right, then and proving to you that I'm right, then I'll do whatever it takes to get my point across. But if the end is to glorify God, to love God by loving you to help you grow, then I'm going to be willing to deny myself the rights that are mine in order to help you grow. The end is different. So
you dropped that quote by Warren Wiersbe, which was so good. Knowledge can be a weapon to fight with or a tool to build with, depending on how you used it. That was so good.
Yeah, Wiersbe's put that well. I thought, like I can if I'm help. He added to that too. He said if your knowledge puffs up, it cannot build up. And that's a play on words, obviously, because Paul used the play on words there, right? I can either use my knowledge to inflate my ego, or I can use my knowledge to serve you, to help you be better in following the Lord and serving him. And again, I don't think the answer to this topic is let the brother who lives in ignorance of the freedom we have stay there. I don't think he's saying just let them stay there and just serve them and let them do their thing. I think discipleship is the process of growing in an understanding of the freedom that I have because Christ died. But I also cannot do that in a way that leads them into sinning against their conscience in the process. The way to help them isn't to lead them into ignoring of their conscience, is to help them know the truth. And I think that's what he's getting at. So
I used that table example that you gave us on Thursday at last night's small group. But thinking about like, man, Halloween, a hot topic, or Christmas, another one. What do you guys think when you think of, how we handle those and how even mature Christians handle those together?
Yeah, we're in a kind of an interesting time where people platform off of the gray areas and want to draw very stark lines where they just don't exist. I don't want to kind of shotgun blast all of what we could be talking about, but you've already listed quite a few where you get more clickbait if you say something definitive about what the Bible does not say something definitive about, where it calls you to enter into a situation lovingly, because the relationship with your brother matters more than what you've settled on about a Christmas tree or whatever, right? Yeah. So,
yeah, it's a tough one because what I don't want to do is I don't want to sit here and think like, hey, if you still think Halloween's bad, you just need to grow up. Like that's not what I want to insinuate at all, because that's not my heart at all. I recognize the dangers of missing or being blinded to the dangers of a certain thing because it just becomes culturally accepted. I recognize that. And I think that there's liberty, there's Christian liberty for me to come to a conclusion that's different than yours on issues that the Bible does not explicitly condemn. And so I don't think, let's just say, for example, you're listening to this and you're a person who says, we do not celebrate Halloween. Fantastic. I'm for that and I support that. And if you feel like that's the right decision that you've come to based upon a thoughtful process of thinking through these things and coming to a conclusion, and this is where you feel is right, great. The issue is for you to impose that barrier or that conviction or that line upon somebody else as if they break it, they're sinning. That's a wrong attitude, because that's the other side of arrogance on this subject. You may not be the person who's like, oh, do whatever you want. You may be the person who's now creating guardrails that God didn't intend there to be guardrails on everybody else. That's what we call legalism, right? Or moral legalism. Can't do that. There has to be an understanding that this is an area where Christian liberty does come to speak into. But if you are a person who has said, you know what, I'm going to be okay. We've decided based on our conviction and our understanding of the issues, we're going to let our kids go trick-or-treating. Okay. Well, then that's your decision. You have Christian liberty, I would say, in that area, but you have not a right to go knock on the door of your brother who chose not to be trick-or-treating and be like, trick-or-treat, you need to participate in this, let's go. Convincing them that they are missing out because this is a conscience issue. You came to two different conclusions on this topic. Love and respect and build one another up. So be careful on how you flaunt either your freedom or your conviction. And if you come to either side of that, make sure it's for the glory of God. That's the bottom line, for the glory of God. And so I think that is a foundational, a foundation for us to build upon concerning these topics like this, you know.
How do you think that affects like those actions as an example of like taking a line in the sand and hard drawing it and then communicating that to where that knowledge is seen by non-believers rather than the love of Christ in the arrogant way almost turns them off. It could turn them off. Like that's an interesting thought I was talking to Haley about was like, yeah, like most of and we talked about it at small group was like, just love you need to love them because they might not care about what the Bible says or what this view is.
Yeah, I don't think that drawing a hard line in the sand on topics has to be done is like done without love. I think you absolutely can and must. If you draw a line in the sand on an issue like, let's say, Halloween or a Christmas celebration or the Easter eggs, like that's another one that's going to come up not too long in the spring is we don't do Easter eggs. That's pagan. So if you're going to draw a hard line in the sand and say we don't celebrate that, you cannot draw that line in the sand without love and compassion. So are you able to do it without love and compassion? Yes, you are. But you also are able to go the other way where for the sake of love and compassion, we're willing to do anything. Well, that's also, there's a ditch on that side of the road as well where it's like, no, we don't want to offend anybody. So we're just going to embrace the Easter bunny and we're going to just, not whatever. I mean, I don't want to pick on one thing because I think there's so many things, but you don't ever go so far for love that you forget truth. But you also don't go so hard in your line of convictions that you do it wooden, without compassion and a heart to say, listen, this is for me and my family. We chose to not participate in this way. We're not trying to be jerks about this. We're going to try to show you here's why, because we believe, and you can fill in. And if it doesn't lead you to an opportunity to share Christ because you are just being kind of abrasive about your conviction, well, now you've sinned in a different way. You might as well just participated in it to begin with, you know?
Yeah, so. There's a lot there. I mean, we're losing the skill of having good conversations, face-to-face conversation. I heard one guy compare social media now to what the Greek Areopagus was, and how it's the place where we go and gather and discuss ideas and try to come up. And I think there's some truth in what he was saying for sure, but it's cold. And a lot of people are asking questions for their own benefit, for right fighting, for their own platform, for whatever reason. The motivations are muddy. And I think there's more to be had in conversations like this, even though as we're talking, we know there are other people listening in, so that you're still kind of crafting the things that you're saying with an edge. There need to be a lot of good, godly conversations with no agenda. Like I don't want to win. I want to understand.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And humility. Like tons of humility is what it takes to have that conversation. That's why this is why we push so aggressively things like small group. Like get in a small group and
Big deal.
and talk about it, where you're going to sit across the room with people who may not fully agree with you.
Yeah.
And you're talking about it and you're wrestling with it and you're saying, I disagree. And that's okay. Because on those things, you have to embrace the disagreements and the messy middle of these issues, because life is not like that defined. It's not, there's nowhere. If the Bible just said, thou shalt not go trick-or-treating, it would be so much easier. But it doesn't, because we're guided by principle, and humility and community sanctifies us so that we're not in a ditch on one side of the road or the other. And we approach these issues with humility and relationship. That's what we're talking about. Knowledgeable humility. Don't be ignorant. Don't be ignorant. If you have a conviction and you believe you're free to do this, or maybe you chose not to, have the reason why, but then do it with humility.
Yeah. That's why it's so important to be in a small group. We talked about that last night too, in small group. But just like if not, you might just be on social media having these conversations that are cold or distant, or just not in person, face to face, where you guys can disagree and still be okay.
And a lot of those places on social media, sorry to interrupt, they're just echo chambers.
Mm-hmm.
They're just like, hey, I'm going to say something and then just get a bunch of people to agree with me. And if you don't agree with me, then all of my buddies are going to jump you in the threads or in the comments, and we're going to make you look stupid, and then it's a losing battle.
Yeah.
But there's got to be context. That's the thing. That's the problem. There has to be context to knowing, like, if me and you disagreed on something, like, I know you for how many years or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And we can have that next level to the conversation. And it's like you're depriving yourself if you're not doing that, if you're not having conversations with people and working through the ways of life. It's not no cookie cutter. Just thinking of, I just thought about this, but right, like knowledge driving worship almost, and love, and knowledgeable humility. Like, what do you think about is this like a direct correlation to like living in worship? Like, what do you think when I say that?
Man, I can see a clear comparison out of the gate would be, there's a difference between knowing and knowing about, like the difference between being a friend and a fan. You know what I mean? Like you can be a fan to a creepy extent. Like pick your favorite athlete, you can learn their stats, you could find out who their family is, you could probably even find their home address and be real weird. But if you went to that, knocked on their door and said, it's great to see you, try to give them a hug, you'd probably get arrested in a hurry, right? There's a huge difference between that and having a relationship with somebody. So from a worship standpoint, man, there is a trap where you can love doctrine and theology so much that it can distance you, if you're not careful, to actually interact with the one whom you worship. You know what I mean? Like all of those are means to that end, to know him more. So that, I think it's MacArthur that said, your doxology can only rise to the level of your theology. Like they work together in tandem. The more I know him, the more I love him. The more I love him, the more I want to worship him, right?
And I think that's what verse 3 is. Mm-hmm. It's not even so much about, it is about knowing him, but it's about being known by him.
Mm-hmm.
We know him because we are known by him, and we are known by him, therefore we love him. And we have a fullness of knowledge that he's talking about, which produces love. So cold, wooden knowledge, this knowledge of what you're talking about, knowing about, if that is not started by, or is not initiated by being known by God, therefore loving God, then I become abrasive, I become cold-hearted, I become a know-it-all, I become somebody who brags about how many people I disagree with, and I leave church after church after church because I am not in a relationship where love is the foundation of that relationship. I'm not saying love at the expense of knowledge. I'm saying true knowledge and true love for God and others go hand in hand. That's what we're getting at. And that being known by God, I think, is the same as I knock on the door and I can't say to somebody, I know all about you, we're friends. I knock on the door and he says, come in, I know you. And you're like, yes, I know you. And that's the picture I think you just painted, which I think is verse 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, moving into point number 2, we build one another up with familial sensitivity. There he goes again.
You didn't know
with
that
the
word?
I had never heard that word, dude.
Oh man,
I was like, familiar? No, and
Familial.
you said familial probably 5 times in the first 30 seconds of saying the line, and I was like, this is real talent, dude. That's what I thought in my head. Like, if we're going super light right now, I'm like listening to it because, and I was like, this is really talent.
Familial, man. I mean, familial.
Is that a word you use though?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to explain it because I was like, I've never heard this word. And I'm not the guy that knows a lot of vocabulary.
There was another word I was going to use for a third point that I thought I was going to do that I was a little bit hesitant on. And I asked Angela, would you know what I mean if I say this? I didn't even end up using that one. And I didn't even ask her about familial because I just thought it was so.
What was the other word?
Did you count with as your alliteration?
No, I didn't go alliteration as aggressively here. You guys want to know how broken I am?
IAL.
All right. So
IAL,
it's
right?
not even the same. I actually had to get over some OCD here, and I wasn't going to go with alliteration. I was going to alliterate the endings. So able and itty. You see that? Knowledgeable, humility. And then I wrestled with a word for familial and then sensitivity. So humility and sensitivity.
I see it.
And knowledgeable. And then I was going to use a different word for familial, but I chose not to because I was like, you know what? These guys are going to make fun of me. I'm not going to do it. So the word I was going to use was affectional. Something like that. And my wife's like, no, I think we would know what that is. Affectional, you know?
Affectional.
But anyways.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
It was going to be affectional something, but familial is a very commonly used word.
Solid.
It just is not as alliterated as I would normally go.
Give me another sentence with familial. We're off the roads right now. We are. I'm loosen up. Like you said, I need to loosen up, dude. It's too strict in here. But
I off the top of my head, a sentence with familial. I don't know, man. I've used it. I know I've used it. I would say your I don't know.
Okay. All right. Here we go. Well, this is point number 2.
At this point, everybody's turned us off now. So,
yeah,
you know.
Sorry. Yeah, got it. It was only like a few minutes. Paul talks about when he calls this weaker believer the brother for whom Christ died. So why emphasize family?
Yeah, because I think we have to see each other as part of a family. Like we're not. I say this a lot, so let me just illustrate it hard in this podcast form. Is there's 2 ways to look at the gathering of the church. One is in the same way you would view the gathering at a restaurant. We're all eating together. There may be 200 people in the dining room of a restaurant, and we are all eating together, but we don't know each other. We can see and maybe eavesdrop on the conversation of the table right next to us, but we don't know each other. We're not interested in each other. We're not invested in each other's lives. We're not encouraging one another. We're just eating together. The church could be that. And in a lot of ways, it is that to some people. It is just a dining hall where I come and I get fed, and I happen to be in the same room with about 200 other people. Or you can see church as that big family dinner. The big table is set. And you know, the family dinner, like the holiday dinner where the table's not big enough, so you like add on the end a Lifetime plastic table and then another Lifetime plastic table, and then you put a tablecloth over it all to make it feel like it's all one big table, and you're all sitting around this table, or maybe there's the kids table and then there's the adult table, and somehow this is different. Like there's a familial dinner feel happening right there, that we are gathered around this, talking about familial topics that are bringing encouragement from a familial standpoint, so that we are encouraging one another, right? That's different. That's different. So the church is the big family table. It's the gathering of the brothers and sisters in Christ to encourage one another, to exercise the one another's, to at times confront one another, to have humble disagreements. And so if I'm interacting on these topics as if we are in a dining room at a restaurant, then I'm not going to try to encourage you. I'm just going to try to be right, because I don't have any invested interest in your success, because I just want to be right. But if you're my brother or you're my sister, then I'm interested in your health and your growth and your development. So now I'm looking at the way I'm handling this situation differently because I have a different relationship with you.
Yeah. I've probably told this story before, but I remember this vivid example from Bracy Ball one time about 15 years ago. And if you know Bracy Ball, he's like the counselor of counselors. He literally wrote the book on biblical counseling. And there was a night we had rehearsal, and he was there waiting for somebody who was going to come meet him. And the guy no called, no showed. The counselor of counselors, no call, no show. And I'm mad for Bracy. I'm like, what kind of person would do that? Stand up. You're doing this for free. You could be charging a ton of money. Like, you're the man, you know. Bracy is the man. And his heart rate didn't elevate. He said, it's totally fine. He said, everything is useful. Like, just that was the tempo he ran. Everything's useful. There's a reason he's not here when we get together. That's where we'll start. His care was for him. His pride wasn't wounded. He just loved that guy and knew God had something in store for that guy and trusted God with that whole situation, so that the next time they met, that's where they would start. And it was so convicting for me in that moment, because my pride welled up and I wasn't even involved in that situation, you know? So
yeah. We don't let you counsel.
That's good, man. Well, I'd just cancel all my appointments. You're late. Too late. Fine, go somewhere else.
If you no call, no show, you're done around here with Matt. So
listen, there's freedom in you finding 3 different ways to use familial. I was like, he figured it out, and it was incredible. God had a plan.
Yeah.
To the point of, like, the next question I had was, how do we balance enjoying Christian freedom with protecting a weaker brother or sister, but also it's a practice. You have to practice it. What you're talking about with Bracy, like, Bracy has probably practiced that to not be filled up with pride thousands and thousands of times to operate with like that. And that is freedom. That is the freedom that we get.
This is totally speculative, but I imagine Paul was not good at this right away. You know, there was a long time between when he was saved and when he went on his first missionary journey. And the way he was literally the smartest guy of most rooms that he ever went into, and could bludgeon you to death with a good argument. And to hear this tone to the Church of Corinth, and in other letters too, where he could have grandstanded on the gray area topics. I think about, like, his letter to Philemon. There's this elephant in the room. Make a statement about slavery. And he threads this needle in this way. It's so loving, because he cared for unity of the brethren and the exaltation of Christ as primary, that he knew what to stay away from and how to talk about what mattered most, even when there was something as significant as that at the table.
Yeah, and I don't think it's even just practiced. The word practice is probably right, but I think the word is sanctification.
Yeah.
It's gospel sanctification, that I've messed up enough in this area that the gospel and the Spirit has convicted me, and the gospel has come to bear on me again and again and again, that I'm finally learning not to do this kind of thing, right? It's not just practice. It's I failed enough at this, and the gospel is sanctifying me and discipling me in the exercising. And I think that sometimes we talk about, like, and I think that's Paul's point, is Christian freedom is not the end all be all. It's not like, hey, let's enjoy our Christian freedom. His point is, enjoyment of Christian freedom is not the end goal of Christianity. The end goal of Christianity is to glorify God through the helping of others. And if Christian freedom is something that I have an enjoyment along the way, then okay, that's great, but it's not the end all be all. So I'm growing in my understanding, my gospel understanding of the right application of Christian freedom. So let's just give an example for a second, right? A hot topic issue currently dealt with is, like, whether or not to drink alcohol. That's a big one. And I'm not going to say much about that on opinions. I'm just saying that's the topic. So let's say there's one person who says, I have Christian freedom to have a glass of wine when I want one. And they act, potentially, not all, but potentially act as if that is the pinnacle of Christian maturity. I have reached the place of Christian maturity so that now I can have a glass of wine freely without guilt. But the problem is that once that freedom is asked to be sacrificed for the good of another, that's a difficult thing, because it's almost as if that's the pinnacle, right? My freedom to drink is the pinnacle of my Christianity. And Paul's point is, no, that's not it. Love is the pinnacle of Christianity. Serving another is the pinnacle of Christianity, even if that means the giving up of some Christian freedom that you have come to understand and experience. So the question isn't, what am I allowed to do? The question is, how is what I am doing affecting my brother? And is it serving him and loving him and caring for him? And therefore, I'm willing to sacrifice my freedom for the good of my brother. That, I think, is what Paul's handling in this situation. And the growing sanctification that the Spirit does in your life brings you to the point where you start to see your brother before you see your freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what he's getting at.
Yeah, that's good. One example that comes to mind, I don't know how directly this applies, but when somebody first starts to, I remember in college, we first started to interact with some Reformed truths. And it's affectionately referred to as the cage stage.
Yeah.
You find this new truth and you want people to understand it. You punch them in the teeth with it. And I remember being super confused about some of the things I was reading and wrestling with. And we went to our pastor at the time, and there was probably 4 or 5 college kids that are trying to understand, what does this mean? Am I just a robot? Do I have no freedom at all? Like, just really wrestling with these truths. And his response to us was, kids, I have 2 master's degrees in this. You're just going to have to trust me, which sent us into overdrive. Like, there was no, what you're talking about, there was no loving, hey, let's talk about this together and let me walk through this with you, allowing for confusing answers and a push and pull. It sent us looking other places. And unfortunately, we ended up looking in better places, but that's not the case for everybody. And that's one example, I think.
Yeah, if you ever have to say, trust me, I know.
Yeah.
If that's your comment ever, well, just trust me. I've studied this out.
You lost me.
Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. And you just lost you may have won, but you lost. You may be right, but you lost because you caused division and discord and disrespect. Yeah. And lost respect from the people you're trying to convince of these things. Yeah. So.
Yeah. That's where it's, you had said something, you can be correct and still careless.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an interesting, just thing, because the sanctification process of working out of us the selfishness to, on first instinct, think of someone else like Jesus did.
Yeah, I'm willingly putting a limit on my freedom to serve you. And Jesus did exactly that. He put a limit. He regulated his freedom because of love. He was free to turn the people nailing him to the cross to dust. He was free to call every angel of heaven to deliver him from his demise. He was free to just with his word switch places with everybody that was hurting him and killing him and beating him. And he limited his freedom for the good of another person, you and me. We are the recipients of the freedom limited willingly by our Savior in order that we might be saved. That's what he's talking about. You're going to tell me that the best thing for you to do is have freedom to eat meat? The best thing about being a Christian is I'm free to have a glass of wine? No, the best thing about being a Christian is I know God and am known by God. And because I'm known by God, I love God, and I cannot love God and not love others. So now I love others and serve them. So my existence is for the great commandment, loving God and loving others and serving them. So doing things for their good. Great commandment played out for us in 1 Corinthians chapter 8.
So good. I don't even know where to go. That was so great. But
yeah, it's not about me. Right?
Yeah,
and that's kind of how we pulled it together. It's not about me. It's not about dinner tables.
It's great.
It's not about glasses of wine. It's about your heart for your brother. So, I mean, we can apply it to, and here's the thing that's so crazy about this, right? So I think about where we're going to go after this, but I was just thinking about, like, where do we apply this? Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. Like, we use the hot topics of the day, the Halloween topic. And again, as soon as we nail down a topic, there's another one that pops up. It's like whack-a-mole, right? We nail this one down, another one pops up, and we got to, and there's always I'm going to offend somebody if I take a stance on this issue or that issue. My thing is, let's just think in love. So like if I know, maybe a silly example of this, if I know that I have a brother who's just growing and understanding, and they've come to a conclusion on, let's say, let's say Halloween, since that's the topic we already brought up. And I blast all over social media this big Halloween party I just had, and our kids are out trick-or-treating, and this is the thing we're doing. What did I just do? Well, I just communicated that I don't care about their conviction, don't care about where they are, and they're missing out if they're not with me in this party. Now I just did something that was very unloving, because now I just put them into a dilemma where they feel like this is what I've come to believe, and I respect that and honor that. I should not be disrespectful towards that by my actions and my attitudes that are so easily flippantly thrown out there into the social media world, where I now hurt, maybe have my brother question God or question the conscience issue that they've come to a conclusion on. The issue's not me. The issue's not trick-or-treating. The issue's not candy. The issue's not Christmas trees. The issue is, do I love you enough to limit my freedom for your good?
Yeah.
I already said that, but I think that's worth saying again.
Yeah,
right?
that's good.
No, it's so good. How do you differentiate for someone who might be listening? Like, how do you differentiate being offended by something and then being like it could you're spiritually out of step?
Yeah, I don't think the topic here is offended, right? That's how we often use this. I don't want to be a stumbling block, which we almost apply it as like, I don't want to be offensive.
Yeah.
The issue here is not that. The issue here is I'm causing my brother to stumble into sin. So I'm causing them to participate in something that their conscience says they shouldn't participate in. And the going against their conscience is an act of sin because they're choosing to go against what they think is right. That's the issue. So the differentiate of that is I don't know that I can differentiate that in every area. I think that we start with the baseline. The baseline is we're not talking about right and wrong things here. We're not talking about moral versus immoral. We're not talking about things that the Bible clearly condemns. You do not have Christian freedom to do something the Bible clearly says you should not do.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about. We're not saying we should eliminate all rules and all guardrails and all guidelines and all principles. And no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about issues where there is a gray issue. There is a opportunity for there to be a differing of views and opinions on a topic. I don't know that I could ever list them all out exhaustively to say that's all of the things that we could potentially disagree on. Because as soon as I do, there's another one that comes up. So I think that I just have to navigate the world I live in with wisdom. And by the way, this is probably culturally contextual. Like if I lived in Africa, if I lived in the Southeast Asia where I do some idol worshiping, I probably have an issue that's different than living in the city of Las Vegas, Nevada in 2025. There's a difference of that. So navigate it with wisdom. Let knowledgeable humility and familial sensitivity be guardrails or guideposts for you on navigating this. And then let the Spirit of God help you know where to apply this in unique situations.
Yeah. Yeah, trust in the Spirit moment by moment in those conversations too. I think we have a tendency to want to resolve it in that conversation and not zoom out and remember everybody's on a long journey. And that's long journey that we're on is a part of a much bigger narrative if you zoom way out. Jesus had that in clear, perfect perspective as he marched towards the cross. And you have to, I can't control your heart. You know what I mean? I can't see into your heart. And no matter how articulate or good I am at arguing a point, I can't shape that. So trusting the Lord to do his work and being okay with the end of a good discussion to go, it doesn't feel like we resolved anything necessarily in the gray area. Again, like there are things worth fighting for.
Yeah.
There are gospel hills to die on. And I think we ought to lovingly still argue for those things from the scriptures, but for the things that aren't that clear, enter into in love for your brother or sister and leave there, with your integrity intact and for the sake of that relationship.
When I think verse 7 is that, however, not all possess this knowledge. So there's clearly a differing of progress. And I think I believe, my opinion is this text teaches that the weight of responsibility to resolve the issue rests upon the one who will limit their freedom to serve the one who is limited by their conscience. So it's not the weaker or the one who is conscience bound. It's not their obligation to just go ahead and just get over it. That's his point. It's not their obligation to just get over it. It's your obligation who feel like you've reached a level of understanding to limit your freedom for the good of the other. And I think that this, and in that, I don't have to try to convince you. My job is not to convince you and educate you. Let me educate you a little bit here, son. Like, that's not the attitude. The attitude is, hey, I get where you are. I'm going to trust the process that the Spirit's bringing you in. He's going to teach you these things, and it's not my job to do so. And it's not my job to belittle you. Like, you'll learn. You'll catch up to me. All of those words are not helpful. It's I get it. I'm not even saying anything about it. I'm just going to not do this because I care for your soul and I care for your faith and I care for your progress. And there may come a day where you recognize, hey man, I think I was a little bit too aggressive on that. And you could be like, yeah, you were, but that's okay because we're all in different places and I want to serve you. That's the difference. Yeah.
That's good.
Looking at your first learning to live question, do I know the example of Christ? We talked about this last night, and I have no idea where you'll take this, but hoping in a good way. But
what does that mean? Like,
yeah, I don't know, because I don't know if I'm right. I'm thinking about what I'm about to say.
Okay,
but
we'll correct you.
We talked. Yeah, I know. Yeah, we talked about knowledge. More knowledge of God allows me to love better and serve better. And I think about that first question because when I often think about knowledge, and I don't know if this is because I'm a newer Christian or whatever, right? We're all different. But like, I think the more knowledge I have, the better that allows me to put my rights aside and to love someone more because I'm thinking about what Jesus did or I'm thinking about what Scripture says. Like, where does that sit with you? We didn't really get too deep last night, but we did talk about that because that was something that I was like, I feel like when I know more, it allows me to do this. He allows me to love better.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's true. Do I know? I think that's one side of that question that I think is worth teasing out, right? Like, I want to know more. And I think probably question 2 goes in with that. How can I grow in my understanding of my freedom? So the more I grow in my understanding of what Christ did for me and that God's opinion of me is not still yet to be determined. Like, his love for me is not a verdict that's outstanding that we're going to hear one day. No, he has declared me who I am. My standing before him is settled in the finished work of Christ. There is not some level of performance left to be done for me to be acceptable in the sight of God. It's completely and fully done in the eyes of God through Jesus Christ. But the more I grow in my understanding of that, or the more I know Christ, the more I know the gospel, the more I recognize, wait, those are things that he's not using against me, that I'm free. I'm free to do that. Now, again, I'm not free to sin, but I'm free to not be bound by the legalism of somebody who says that is sin when it's not sin. That's the difference. But the other part of that is, do I know the example of Christ in that have I experienced the selfless sacrificial act of Christ on the cross that saves me so that now I can start to cut the tethers that bind me and follow him with my life, right? So yes, I think yes to your question or comments, but also that's the question I think I would present is like, don't sit here and think, well, I want to be free from the legalism. No, I want to be free to know Christ and serve Christ. And that happens by knowing what Christ did for me on the cross. That's salvation, you know?
Yeah, that's good. I think about when you're talking, it remind me of the example of a rabbi's yoke and what a well-intentioned, he might have a close relationship with the Lord. He would add things around the ways he kept the law from a heart that wanted to be obedient, right? So simple example is to keep the Sabbath holy. I don't want to work, so I'm going to make a rule for myself. I'm not going to lift anything over 10 pounds. Yeah. So once I do that, I know I'm going to get in the yard, blah, blah, blah. The person following him misses the whole relational aspect of what he was doing and interacting with the Lord and setting that parameter for himself and goes, to keep the Sabbath holy, don't lift anything over 10 pounds. And it's ice cold, it's legalism, it's removed from the heart to know God more and spend time with him and remove encumbrances so that you can grow in your love relationship with Jesus. If you circumvent that by adding things to it because you're being won over by, surface level arguments or people who are convincing you otherwise, like you have to get back to the reason Jesus says my yoke is easy and my burden is light is he says, come to me, be with him before you go and do anything else.
That's good.
That's cool. Anything else you guys want to throw in at the last moment? I always open it up.
Yeah, I think that the point is to be applied in not just these issues. Like we lightened or we narrowed it a couple times. We kind of brought our focus into Halloween or the alcohol issue, or he did in meat offered to idols. But when you pull out, these are generic, and what I mean by that, they are general statements. Love. Like don't be arrogant. Let's just say that. Let's just take away all of the meat offered to idols and all the gray areas. What do we walk away with? Don't interact with arrogancy. Humbly love one another and treat them as a brother, not a stranger or a competitive opponent. Treat them as a brother that you are invested in and interested in their growth. And again, let's go back to if we see our church as a family dinner table, not a dining room of a restaurant, these things will be true. If the gospel is the center, if the gospel is the foundation upon which our relationships are built upon, then we will follow the example of Christ. We will be known by God. Therefore, we will love God. And by loving God, we will love others. Then we will serve others. And our freedoms will not be the thing that we think is the thing, but our willingness and ability to serve another. Is there anything in the meat? No. But that's not the question. The question is, how are you serving your brother? And if our church has this, again, this podcast I think is predominantly listened to by a handful of people from our church. If this is the culture of our church, if this is the feel of our church, if this is how we interact with one another, listen, this becomes one of the sweetest places on earth. It becomes heaven on earth. And I think that's our goal, is with the gospel's influence and the example of Christ to interact with one another in this way. So whatever this applies to, stop looking at, I'm going to hold on to my freedom to do what I want, and start looking at, I'm willing to give up all freedom if it means the building up of my brother. And that's the example of Christ.
Yeah, that's good.
That's good. Cool. Smash that subscribe button. As
Smash
Andrew says, put it on your favorites, like it, share it with your people.
Share it. Leave the comments down below.
This one we got off the rails, so but we're back. We're so we've never been more back. Andrew, pray us out.
Yep. Father, help us to understand this and make application of this text to our lives. I'm so, forgive us if we brought a topic up that we applied this to that isn't applicable to. Give us wisdom to clarify that and make sure that we're right. Our heart is truly to honor you and to serve our brothers and sisters so that we would be encouraged to pursue you and live for you and know you and grow in our walk with you. And we don't want to do anything that hinders that or compromises that. So help us, Father. And I pray that this, again, would be impactful for those who are taking a few minutes to listen to it. And if there's anybody listening to this that does not know Christ as their Savior and the freedom that he secured for them, I pray that today they would know Jesus, they would trust Christ, and that you'd save them, and for your honor and for your glory. Thank you for Jesus. It's in his precious name we pray.